Let's do it.
Absolutely, go for it. So I was introduced to you by the Godfather himself, literally the Godfather himself. I'll give you some space, mate. Like, who are you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So my name is Nathan Jenkins. Um, let's see. What do you want to know? I am this is a CrossFit themed podcast, right? So I can say I've been doing CrossFit for just over 5 years.
Yeah.
So not all that long in the grand scheme of things. But I discovered it or came across it and started trying it as a kind of in my role as a professor at the university here in my town, the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, where I teach exercise physiology classes. I'm in the kinesiology department, and I have a research program and longstanding interest in exercise and chronic disease. But it was in teaching class at UGA that we were touching on a topic that's always really fun is the controversies and trends in fitness. And of course, this is about 2013, 2014. The topic of CrossFit comes up in that context. And we did a kind of like a little debate in class. And I can't remember too much about the specifics of it. I try to keep it balanced. Like, of course, there was the whole injuries question, but also there's a lot of good stuff like the intensity and all that. And the class really liked it. Well, after the class that day, I had two students come up and asked me, "Hey, well, have you ever tried CrossFit? Like, what do you really think of it?" And it turns out they were level one coaches at the local gym, and that I can speed up this story a little bit, but that actually really got me thinking. It's like, you know what, that would be kind of neat to just like kind of do a little experiment. So I started doing CrossFit after like a lot of pondering and research and thinking a lot about what I did like about it, which was the whole concept of fitness and having a concrete, defensible definition of fitness and a way to actually improve it or promote it. I was like, that's really cool. I thought about it for about 6 months and then I said, I'm going to try this for a year. And that was the year 2015. And I've been doing CrossFit ever since. And it has also um, very much influenced my work in many ways, my teaching and my research. And so through that, I have it's evolved so that I have a couple other professional kind of roles and side gigs, if you will. I've done some consulting for CrossFit Inc. in the role of a subject matter expert on exercise science. I've gotten to interact with some folks like that in the seminar staff, which I guess you're referring to Carl, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
who linked us up. Yeah, who I honestly, I met so many seminar staff members. One talk I gave at the summit a couple years ago in 2019. He may have been there, but I also know that I've interacted with. I listened to your interview with him. That was awesome. And just a lot of great people. I've met a lot of great people through that kind of small role. And I also do nutrition and training consulting for a company called RP Strength, or that's the short name. The long name is Renaissance Periodization. And that's kind of another side gig that I have. And we can talk about any of that, man. So that was a really long introduction.
No,
But
you
that's
go
kind
for
of
it, mate.
a synopsis of who I am and how I ended up it's quasi how I ended up on your podcast, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
it's funny how many avenues you end up going down simply by turning up to a CrossFit gym and throwing yourself in at the deep end, right? You end up meeting all these different people from all these different, like, sort of areas of life. And then you end up, like you said, like, you're doing a lot because you
Oh
met
yeah,
all these people. And, like, what sort of, like, research have you ended up doing, like, the specifics in that
sure.
regarding to CrossFit?
I'd love to talk about that. Well, it hasn't been a complete shift so historically, like my training, I did my doctoral work in the area of exercise and cardiovascular and metabolic disease risk factors. So anything that includes both traditional risk factors that most everybody has heard of, or most, not everybody, but a lot of people are generally familiar. They're familiar with things like glucose and insulin and blood pressure and um, lipids and triglycerides and so forth. I have a longstanding interest in how does exercise affect all of that. And when I say exercise, I mean historically it's been the traditional treadmill running, standard 30 minutes of treadmill or some other cardio implement. That's what most of the literature is really on. It's like cardio type conditioning work. Um, and then also novel risk factors for cardiovascular disease. My dissertation specifically was in the area of exercise and cardiovascular stem cells, which I'm not really studying that so much anymore, but that kind of that covers the spectrum. Well, since I've been informed by the CrossFit way of thinking, the methodology, what's really shifted about my work is how we define exercise in the laboratory. So if you look I'm not sure how much you care about this or how much your listeners care, but if you look, just kind of, I'll be as brief as possible. If you look in the literature on exercise, the effects of exercise on fill in the blank, whatever it is that you're interested in, you're going to come up, you go to PubMed, which is at least in the US, our database of all published research. And it's a US based resource, but it's obviously accessible worldwide. So it's got basically the sum total of the world's knowledge on scientific research. So you go in there, you like Google, you search for exercise and whatever your variable of interest is, and you're going to come up with a lot of hits. And I'm going to shoot from the hip and give you a number, something like 90 to 95% of the studies on exercise and whatever it is that you want to find out is going to be endurance type exercise. So like I said, traditional treadmill running, or there's a lot of stationary cycling, and you can imagine it's what you can imagine. What you would imagine is what it actually is a dude sitting on a bike pedaling away in in a horrible lab, cinder block walls, just like bored out of their mind, ready to chew their arm off because it's just such a miserable exercise protocol. No intervals, no rest. It's all continuous, steady state, like just the most boring kind of cardio you can possibly imagine. That's the way we've studied exercise for years, like ever since I've been in the field, and historically, like going back to all studies on exercise since like the 60s and 70s, or even before that. The approach that I've taken is more in keeping with the CrossFit approach, which is to define it in terms of Newtonian physics, like the kinematics. So you can apply this to any type of movement, or exercise protocol, and this allows us to expand beyond the tired old methodologies of the treadmill running and the biking. So for example, you can do kettlebell swings, and you can do burpees, and you can do a rower, do like calories or meters or whatever have you on the rower. But for reporting exercise performances like that in a scientific paper, you have to just take another step than what we would do in the gym, which is to do to basically calculate the work that's done. And that's involved. So for example, if you're going to move a kettlebell, a 53-pound kettlebell or 35-pound kettlebell or whatever it is, you just take some measurements of like how far does that kettlebell travel during the swing, and or with a burpee, how tall is the person, how much does their center of mass move up and down throughout that repetition. And if you make those careful measurements, and there's some assumptions in how we make these measurements, you make those measurements, you can actually get at the stuff that the level 1 talks about, which is work. So how much load is moved, over what distance, because we're making those measurements of the distance. And then of course, just like always with CrossFit, we have the timer going, right? So you get the time piece, you divide one by the other, work over time, force times distance over time, that's power, right? And so that's what we're doing with there's a lot of specific physiological questions we're addressing with this, but the fundamental thing that's unique about our lab right now is that we're applying these physics-based approaches to quantifying how the exercise stimulus. And it's going to sound nothing novel to your listeners I think if they're familiar with the CrossFit methodology, it's like, of course, that's how you quantify exercise. But I'll tell you we're having a hard time getting papers published right now. We've got two one was published in March of last year, and one that we're just having the hardest time getting reviewers to understand it, because it's just so fundamentally different than the way it's always been done in the literature. But we'll get it out there. It'll get there.
Why do you think it's not been done that way?
I've been on a few podcasts, man, and sorry. Because it's not obvious. The tradition is, and I'll try to be succinct. What I was about to say a second ago is I've been on a lot of podcasts, and I always work on trying to give more and more succinct answers, but I don't think I've gotten any better at it. But no, the reason it's difficult and it hasn't been done the way that's kind of obvious to the CrossFit approach is that It has to do with, I don't know if you've heard of the VO2 max, but it's the traditional measure of oxidative potential in humans. So the maximal aerobic capacity is the kind of industry standard way of assessing fitness. And that's like in academic parlance, fitness and VO2 max, they're synonyms. Now to a CrossFitter, the VO2 max might be a component of fitness. And I would think that's probably the more correct view, but that's just the dogma, is that VO2 max is the end all and be all of how you're going to quantify someone's fitness. And so what people do in most of the studies I've been talking about, like always the treadmill running, always the cycling, is to find the step one on like the first visit to the lab for any study is to find the subject's VO2 max, put them on a bike, put them on a treadmill, and make them go till they can't go anymore, and hook them up to the machine to measure the oxygen uptake, and you get the number. And then you're positioned to then, for the next visit to the lab, you're addressing your experimental question, which is the effect of exercise on X, Y, or Z. And that's typically done at some percentage of that individual's VO2 max that you measured on the first day. So like, for example, for my dissertation, I looked at the effect of acute endurance exercise on levels of cardiovascular stem cells. And that acute exercise protocol was 30 minutes of running at 70% of the VO2 max. And that's the reason we did it that way, is because the whole literature was looking at exercise that way. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel at the time. That was the logic behind just doing it the way everyone else did it. But the trouble with the big machine that is science is that you get a lot of studies that are, you got a lot of people setting out to do their studies that way. It's like, well, we don't want to do anything too different. We don't want our paper to encounter too much difficulty in getting published. So let's just do it the same way that everyone else does, but tweak it just a touch. And so we make these really, really, really incremental advances in progress. And I'm at a point in my life, in my career, where I'm not interested in like little small increments anymore. I want to make kind of bigger, but more kind of fundamental level impact. I don't necessarily want to make some big splash or anything, but it's like, let's just address fundamentally what's going on. And fundamentally what's going on is not necessarily what percent of someone's VO2 max it is, but what is their physical work output? Like, what is their power output, their work capacity? And again, that is this is going back to your original question of how is my work kind of been impacted by CrossFit. This is all from the CrossFit methodology. This is the stuff that I'm like kind of daydreaming about when I'm either going to the gym or leaving the gym. And I'm kind of like, the thoughts are swirling about like work and life, and like, how can I actually capture some of this over here that I'm having fun with in the gym and apply it to my job. And that's what we've been doing. And we're early on in the, like I said, we've got one paper published that came out in March of last year. And we've got a couple others. One other one that's in the throes of peer review. We've had it rejected by like 8 journals, not because it's a bad paper, but I think it's a really good paper. It's just too different. People don't understand it. And then we've got a couple of projects that were halted actually because of COVID. That's been a big deal. We've got one that's probably never going to see the light of day, and then a couple others that are in the hopper that will come eventually whenever we can get back up and running full steam. But anyway, I hope that helps understand a little bit about more of what kind of stuff we've been doing and how I feel like you've gotten a dangerous glimpse inside my brain, and I'm sorry for that.
Hey, like when you're passionate about something, like you end up going in like a million different directions at a million miles an hour, right? So that's absolutely fine. Like my head does exactly the
100%.
same thing.
Yeah, it's wild. It's crazy.
How see, like it doesn't really make sense to me how if something is a little bit vastly different, then it won't get published, because in my eyes it would be like we need to ask those questions, right? And if we've always done something one way, if we do it a different way, it could completely not work, and that's fine. But then we know it doesn't work. It doesn't really make sense to kind of just completely push it to the side and be like, nah, you're an outlier. It doesn't really work. I'm not actually going to give it the light of day. Do you think, like going into the universities, do you think the way you're teaching has changed since doing CrossFit and kind of like sparking that whole like, why don't we think about it this way sort of thing?
Oh yeah, teaching has probably been impacted as much as anything else. So, well, to address the first part of your comment there, I think I think I'm on record on several other interviews, but being incredibly critical of how my field operates and things. I don't want to be unfair though, because I think there are some people. We've got some reviewers who get it, and they are as anti-dogmatic as I am, but we're still having a hard time getting these things out there into the literature because they're so different that it's just going to take time. Like their initial reaction is okay, maybe it's like a hybrid of two things. It's okay, this is different, and that's really really cool, but because it's different, we also have to really put this through the ringer, right, and really scrutinize it. And I actually have, I mean, I have some experience with this, not just with CrossFit, but anytime I've worked in, I don't know, if I were to slice and dice it, probably 4 or 5 different specific sub niches in my 12 to 13 year career of publishing and in science. And every single time I've gone into something new, that first paper is always the most difficult, always. It's just that we made the biggest leap now that I've ever done. So we're having proportionally, I think, the most difficulty with it. But like, I wish I could give a good example. Right now, I can give you an example too. Like right now, we're doing my lab's first ever work in an area known as metabolic flexibility, which is kind of, some of your listeners will be familiar with that term. Basically, it's the idea that if a metabolically flexible person burns the substrate that they're ingesting. So if you're metabolically flexible and I give you a high fat meal, you burn that fat very well. A metabolically inflexible person will favor storage of that fat. We're going to have difficulty publishing those papers because I don't have a reputation in that area, and the method is new for my lab, and so it's just always difficult to start something. And I think that's healthy. I think that's good. I think that level of that skepticism and scrutiny is necessary. But there's still a significant, I mean, by and large, I stand by my general critique, which is exercise science is a field that's characterized by a lot of dogma and tradition. And we're seeing kind of a turnover. The old guard is kind of, a lot of older thought leaders, frankly, are retiring, and it's just going to take a while for the new ideas to advance. But back to the teaching question, I think these are the exact topics that whenever I'm always looking for the opportunity with my students. I really, really enjoy teaching, particularly the undergrads, but also I have a couple of graduate classes that I teach as well. And whenever I see an opportunity to kind of touch on and maybe like pause the deep dives that we take into the nitty gritty content and touch on some of the higher level elements that we're talking about, as just a couple of examples, then I do that with the students. And I do that, I think, I would say that the way the CrossFit methodology has rocked the world of how I used to think about exercise absolutely informs my approach to the classroom on 100%.
It's always important to ask those questions, right? And have those debates and kind of push the boundaries and see what works and be the revolutionary. And I do agree with the fact of when people need to be a little bit skeptic about, the outlier or someone just come out with something completely new. Yeah. Like take a back seat and go, hang on a minute. Like, let's think about this before we just go balls to the wall with it. 100%. Like, how do you see the students coming up now? Like even through the undergrad, like obviously CrossFit's been around for a little bit. There's some different methodologies coming around. Like what do you see through the mindsets of like undergrads coming through at the moment? It's
so interesting, man. So I think it was 2016, about a year after I started CrossFit. I decided, I thought I was going to be really clever, and I created a what's called at our university, we have something called a first year Odyssey seminar. So the first year students, the freshmen, they are required to take one of these seminars, and any faculty member can create a seminar, and usually they're going to be approved. It's a good way for me, I use to get a little either bump and pay, or you can use the funds that generates to go to your research, which is usually what I do, and it's great. But so for me, I created a seminar called Controversies and Trends in Fitness and Health, kind of a full semester version of that discussion, a couple of discussions that I would have in my main class I was teaching. So I'm going to expand this to protract over a whole semester with the first years. And so the first time I taught the class, it went about like I thought. Like most of the students in there hadn't done CrossFit before. Maybe they'd heard of it, but they signed up for it. Most of them signed up for it, actually, to be honest, because it fit their schedule really well. but but a few of them signed up because they were genuinely like, oh wow, this is actually a controversy that I've heard of. Like maybe if they had like an athletic background, and we'd had some interesting conversations. Now, the last time I offered it was this past fall, actually. No, hold on. It was, yeah, in fall 2020. So right when we first came back and from the pandemic and everything. And this past semester, my honest impression was that it wasn't that particularly controversial for these kids. I mean, most of them had heard of CrossFit. A lot of them had done CrossFit either a little bit or a lot in high school. It's just kind of like a normal way. Like you got to think about these kids, if they're 18 in 2020, that means they were born in 2002. They don't remember when CrossFit wasn't really around. I mean, maybe a little bit. They were little children when CrossFit was kind of like becoming mainstream in the late 2000s, early 2010, 2011 kind of era. They are not going to remember when CrossFit wasn't like a thing that, because for me, like I don't know how old you are, man, but I'm in my late 30s, and I remember like at that age and like in my teens and stuff, like in the 90s, we went to the Globo gym. So that was the norm of how people exercised. I mean, like you do the back and buys on what is it? International Chest Day is Monday, right?
Yeah.
Back and buys on Tuesday. Leg day maybe once a month if you're like that's how we did it, right? And that was like the norm. And in my mind, up until like really the last couple of years, that's the norm that we're pushing back against the mainstream kind of dogma of the fitness industry. And that's kind of I think that's still there. I definitely think that's still there, but it is fading. I think there's a transition going on. But to answer your question of the younger generation, I mean, it's like there's boutique fitness in general. It's kind of mainstream now. It's not just the Globo gyms, but it's the CrossFits and the Orange Theories and all these other sort of fitness brands. Um, and there's like one in every shopping center. They've got a different flavor that they probably seen in their towns where they grew up. So it's really different.
I think it's definitely like a top-down approach. Like we've been able to define, fitness or now work capacity as you're working on, and people get hyped up about it, right? They're like, oh my God, like we actually understand what's going on and what we're doing now, rather than just like, oh yeah, what is fitness? What is health? What is work capacity? I don't even know what that means. Never heard of it, sort of thing. And people are really the
Right.
mindset shifting. You can see it in a local box, right? You walk in and people no longer have in the forefront of the mind of like, I need to lose, a stone or I need to look a certain way. It's like, hey, I want my performance to go up, I want my fitness to improve, and then everything else is
Right.
secondary to that. And especially going back to your point with the kids, I think it's incredible because you see, like for example, yesterday I was in a class and then a kid literally has cycled straight from school, popped his bike in, and he's there waiting for the next class. And I'm like, you wouldn't be seen dead doing that
That's
back in the
awesome.
day. Like they would be in a
No.
a bodybuilding gym, curling in front of a mirror, or you know what I mean, or on the street corner smoking up or whatever. Like, but now
Yeah.
kids are like, nah, let's go to the CrossFit
Yeah.
gym, whatever, and let's work on our performance.
I still think, yeah, I still think it's at least locally to me, and probably in the States in general, but certainly locally to me, the kids have seen CrossFit and have heard of it, but it's still not mainstream. I'd love to know the numbers. That's impossible to know, but I think it's like it's a small minority of kids. Like for example, at my gym, we're growing by leaps and bounds. New members are coming like every day, it seems like, which is great. But still not a lot of kids. Now that's maybe because we don't have kids specific programming, and you got to kind of have that for CrossFit. So that's the other kind of layer to specifically to CrossFit boxes. In order to have CrossFit Kids classes, you have to have that certification, and I think the kids have to be in their own class or something. I'm not quite sure
Yes.
how it works, but that that's something. But I think that's the way of the future, man, because I think it is becoming like and it's not just like the expansion has been exponential in the last 5 years that I've seen, like in terms of like the general awareness of CrossFit, including the kids. So I think we'll see it. Hopefully we'll see more of that sooner rather than later.
I think places like Scandinavia are paving the path for everyone else to follow, because kids are just,
Yes.
they're like pushed to like, hey, you're doing a
Mm-hmm.
sport, but you're also doing an exercise program to keep you fit and healthy, and you're doing this and that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, Western, quote unquote, Western ideal countries like the UK and America will end up just turning around and saying, okay, yeah, we're going to have to follow suit.
If we could follow the Scandinavians in many ways, it would be good for us. And as far as our health, like as far
Yeah.
as lifestyle and health habits. Um, I went to Copenhagen one time on a trip, and I really want to go back. But I'll never forget my impression was, God, everybody's fit here.
Yeah.
Everyone is fit. I mean, just the normal body composition of the average Dane is like what we would look and say that they look just like a chiseled athlete,
Mm.
And that's just a guy. It was just a guy on his bike or a lady on her bike going to work, and then they train every day in addition to riding their bike all over town. I loved it.
I spent a little bit of time
Yeah.
in Denmark. I was in
Mm-hmm.
I went into, it's split into like 3 islands, right? So I was in the middle island, and
Mm-hmm.
then I also spent a little bit of time in Copenhagen, and my perception of the place was exactly the same. Like, everyone cycles
Mm-hmm.
everywhere or walks, everyone
Yeah.
trains and works out, eats pretty
Yeah. I
good.
was I was a fat American there, man, for sure. I stood out. I definitely wow, it was crazy. You could tell, everybody could tell that I was American, 100%.
Yeah, well, I'm blonde
So
hair and blue
they're very nice.
eyes. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So they
yeah.
looked at me as like one of their own.
Yeah, you fit right in, man. Yeah.
Until I open my mouth and they're like,
Until
"Oh,
you
wow,
until you speak.
yeah."
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, that's
Yeah.
definitely not Danish. Um,
Yeah.
how did you get onto RP? Because
Onto RP.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think they're turning tides in the whole of nutrition.
This is one of my favorite subjects. I'm glad we're going there.
Yes, dive in.
RP. It's one of those things. At first, I was a client,
Oh,
and then I had if you go back on my Instagram, it's like to 2017. My little transformation is posted. But yeah, so after doing CrossFit for a couple of years, it's a very typical story. I had made the beginner gains and kind of developed some basics, basically all the basic skills. I was one of these. I felt like I could RX most workouts, but I realized that my body composition wasn't what I wanted it to be, and I started generally paying attention to my nutrition. It's like, gosh, and then it became this kind of like growing, nagging thing in the back of my mind. It's like, I should really get this buttoned up, because I thought I was eating well, but then you don't realize. You walk by you walk through the kitchen just on your way to do something else, and there's a jar of nuts sitting there, and you grab like a handful of them, right?
mm,
And so anyway, I wanted to do something else, and I did a little bit of, I can't remember even how I came across RP. I think I followed them on Instagram or something, and I looked up, maybe I followed some of the athletes that they sponsor, actually, if I recall. But then I looked into at the time, the main product was the templates, the auto templates that are, and you can still get them, but now there's the app and there's one-on-one coaching. So I bought an auto template and started following it, and really gained a much better understanding of the fundamentals of nutrition.
mm.
And that's from a guy. I got one or two classes shy of a minor in nutrition from college, and I've even done some nutrition related research. But as far as like real world applying those principles to your actual diet and how to construct your meals and go through a weight loss program, a fat loss program, um, I didn't have a lot of personal experience with that, actually. So I did that through the template, and one of the cool things about being a professor is that I have of exercise science is that I have a DEXA machine for body composition in my lab.
Wow.
So I did that and before and after, and I can tell you that I lost, I think, okay, it's been a while since I looked at the exact numbers, but 28 pounds, 25 pounds lost, but I lost 28 pounds of body fat and gained 3 or 4 pounds of muscle, or 3 or 4 pounds of lean tissue, in a 3 to 4 month period. Um, so total transformation of my body composition. And I followed it pretty closely, 90%, 95% is what I would say my compliance level was, which is what we recommend. So just with that, it absolutely blew me away. I didn't know that I had, like, there were muscles showing up in places that I didn't know I had. And so towards the end of my cut, as we call it, I reached out to the CEO of the company, Nick Shaw, who's now, I call him boss, saying, "Hey, this is just, tell him a little bit about who I was and my background, and just how impressed I was with the programs. Like I've not really seen the sort of the interface of science and I guess you'd call it like something that like a consumer can buy, like something that's where in the fitness or nutrition space, I've never seen anything where you see the application of science rolled out so well. And I'm just really, really impressed. It's blown my mind. And also, if you ever wanted to partner in any way, in my mind at the time, it's like, gosh, this could be really cool to incorporate into my research. If I wanted to do like a diet exercise intervention, we could use the templates, something like that. And so that got us talking about that. And actually, Nick did end up supporting my lab with a small grant back in the summer of 2017. So always thankful for that. Shout out to Nick for that. But then, so actually, as part of that, Nick came to visit campus, and I think it was November of 2017. And during that visit, I just casually floated the idea. It's like, hey, man, if you ever needed another, because I knew a little bit about the one-on-one coaching that they had, and I'd seen kind of the profiles on the website of all the different coaches. It's like, hey, if you ever needed somebody with a background more in CrossFit, because I know a lot of RP clients are CrossFitters these days, I'd love to, chat about becoming a coach or helping out with the coaching. And he goes, that's actually a really good idea. We actually could use that. And so, long story short, it was already a long story, so I'll make it short. I ended up signing on as a contract consultant for RP, and that was in 2018. So I've been doing that coming up on 3 years.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, and I've had like a pretty steady stream of clients that I've mostly CrossFitters, but not exclusively by any stretch. But my niche within the company is the kind of, there's two of us, one of the CrossFit coaches, if you will, because I just have a really good understanding, obviously, of the CrossFit methodology, of typical CrossFit workouts, whether that's somebody like me training 1 hour a day, or more advanced kind of protocols of where we might have 2 or 3 workouts a day for like a competitor. I've got a pretty good understanding of how to match the macros, the fueling for that, for whatever it is. I can kind of like look at the person and see what their goals are and what their training is, and come up with a really good nutrition plan for them. And then it's usually a 3-month-ish program, give or take, 3, 6, 9, 10, 12 month, or whatever it is, program to help them achieve their goals. And it involves a lot of communication via email and social media. And it's basically what it is. I don't like to put it this way because it sounds like it's making light of it, but I call it my hobby. It's like what I do. It's what I do instead of like watching Netflix or I wish I had more time to read books. I don't read a lot of books for pleasure these days because it's what I do kind of on the side. But I really, really love it because, you're changing someone's life. I mean, absolutely, you're helping somebody get a handle on this mythical thing that's really, really difficult to understand thing that is nutrition. And I guess my biggest passion with that in that role is to educate people on, okay, here's the basics of what you need to know about nutrition, and here's how you can go forward. Like my goal always for clients is to go forward from the coaching program independently and have the ability, all the tools and knowledge and resources necessary to be successful and maintain their new body weight or new body composition indefinitely. So, that's RP in a nutshell.
Yeah, like nutrition is a really hard beast to tame, isn't it? Because there's so much bullshit out there that's just floating around, and people end up believing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's through social media, whether it's through old academic papers, whether it's through whatever. There's a lot flying around, a lot of information, and people get literally like a cat in headlights. Like, oh my days, I don't know what to focus on. Like, this is crazy.
They do that, and then the other thing is that nutrition has become kind of like the third forbidden topic at the dinner table with your family. The first two being politics and religion. Yeah. Because then if you talk about nutrition and you're not of the right, like if you're not in the right mindset or the right kind of approach to it, if you're at a dinner table, this would be interesting, but if you're at a dinner table with a bunch of people who are really, really diehard keto and you're the carbs guy, or vice versa, then it's just something you don't talk about, right?
Yeah.
Everyone just stares at their food, and it's just like, oh, okay, if I eat this bite of pasta, am I going to be judged or, kicked out of the dinner table or whatever? And it's just a really, really touchy topic. And I mean, I've been part of some of those conversations, and I've been with both like-minded people and people who have opposing views or whatever. I personally think there's a place for any diet that's kind of out there as an approach. There's some fundamentals that kind of cut across all of them if it works. Number one. Number two, there's different strategies that work better for different people at different times. Um, so I just think, anyway, that's my point with all that, though, was the tension around nutrition and different kind of flavors of diet has really been a barrier to making progress. And I think we can kind of, hopefully that's what we're getting to a place where as a community, we're getting past that, because the tension is a lot of times unnecessary. I mean, it's just really, there's multiple avenues to success. And I mean, at RP, I think I can speak for everybody at RP, but we're for whatever works best and is most evidence-based and is most scientifically defensible. I mean, that's why we have a reputation for being the best, hard-earned, I think, reputation for being the absolute best in the industry. And a lot of that is rooted in our evidence-based approach, and keep what works and discard what doesn't. So a lot like CrossFit, actually.
Exactly. And I do think the whole stigma is finally getting broken down, simply because there's so many different diets out there, like you said. Yeah, but they all work. There's a reason why they're out there, is because they work. They might work for you, but they don't work for me, or vice versa. And it's just like, hey, do whatever you want. Like, you could be a Buddhist, I could be a Muslim, and it doesn't really matter. Same thing, you can go keto and I could be vegan, and it doesn't matter, as long as, like, we're living your life the way you want to live it. You know what I mean? Doesn't what was I going to say? Oh yeah. So what would you say would be your biggest takeaway from coming up through the ropes with RP, obviously going through their template personally yourself, seeing what that's like, seeing the changes, having that light bulb moment in your own mind, and then started working for him? What would be your biggest takeaway that you've had?
Well, depends on. I'll start off with like the really, really kind of meta high level takeaway, because it applies to nutrition, but like it applies to everything in life, and it's really that the long road is the shortcut. And if you're looking for something more specific and concrete about nutrition, we can go there too. But I think the big picture is that if you try to accelerate your progress and like look for little hacks or something that's more than just the basics, then you're actually end up just going to, the end result is going to be you're just going to just slow yourself down. The biggest takeaway is to if you don't need any more than just the simple fundamentals, and that's it. That's all that you ever need. And like I said, I think that cuts across a lot of things in life. That's kind of like a life philosophy, if you will. So like I said, start with high level meta, but if you want to get more specific in the nutrition stuff, we can go there next. But that's the first thing that came to mind when you asked that.
It's totally true, mate. Like, my dad said the same thing. When I was growing up as a kid, I remember distinctly him saying, you do it right, you do it once; you do it shite, you do it twice. And I'm just like, oh,
I love that.
You know what I mean?
Like,
and it's you end up, if you want to, speed down the road, you end up developing so many different potholes that you have to go back and just fill in. You might as well do it right the first time. Do it
right. Yeah. And on the nutrition side, the way I see that with clients is, and the month of January, I would say I spent a lot of time working on this exact piece. We got a lot of people that signed up for the first of the year, New Year's resolution crowd. And a lot of them have fallen off. Here we are in early February. A lot of them have fallen off. But most haven't. Most are still with me. But I've had a lot of conversations over in the emails with clients about, they're basically what they're looking for is the way they're super eager and gung-ho, and motivation is riding really, really high at the beginning. And they're trying to capitalize on that, saying, is there anything I can do to speed this up? All right. So what we do with the start to the diet is the first 2 weeks, we're establishing maintenance intake, and that drives people nuts. I write up a diet that's actually not designed to lose weight. It's actually designed to maintain current weight for 2 to 3 weeks. It's necessary for me. So that way I have a baseline from which to make adjustments as we go along, as far as the reducing fats or carbs or whatever it is to reduce the caloric intake to produce the weight loss. So during that first 2 weeks, it's like question after question. It's like, so when do I actually start losing weight? Can we do anything to speed this up? Is it one client, it was hilarious. He emailed, the heading of his email was like, tap, tap, tap. Is this thing broken? And I'm like, nope, this is exactly where we should be. And you have to explain that, like, and I'm not looking at where you want to be in a month or even really 3 months, which is what you paid for. I'm looking at where you want to be. Even if you're not yet, I'm thinking about where you are going to be in about a year or 3 years or 5 years, or hell, like we can get really, again, getting meta about it, like 10, 30, 50 years down the line. Where do you want to be in terms of your body composition? Get a crystallized vision of that, and your health and fitness and everything else. And nutrition is a foundation of all of it. Like, where do you want to be in terms of that? And let that crystallized vision inform the steps that you take today, right? That's why we're not going to speed things up right now, because if we do that, then the whole sort of the value and all the lessons that could be learned, that could all just be missed. And oftentimes it is missed. And in my view, my clients are paying top dollar to afford my time, basically. And I want to give them a return on that investment. And that's why I go one pace, and that's my pace. I do not speed things up ever. And no matter how many times they ask me, I'm not going to accelerate the process. I'm not going to cut fat I'm not going to cut to the last stage of the fat loss diet in the third week of the program, because it's inevitable. They're just going to burn out. So yeah, these things we're talking about, as far as the biggest takeaway is, just go the right pace, and don't try to speed things up, because it's just going to end up being a waste of your time.
What do you end up saying to them when they try and shortcut and go a little bit quicker, and they're just not getting it?
Sometimes people do it anyway.
Yeah.
And they do it. Yeah. And it's like, because they can see, so the way it works is you get a custom template. It's an Excel file with your fats and your carbs and your protein and your veggies. And so the client in the beginning, they gave me their schedule, and any times that they train and the times they're not able to eat because of work or whatever. So I fill in a diet that matches, that's all set up just custom for them. And then after the 3 weeks I talk about, that leave-in period, I start taking away, if it's a weight loss diet, right? I'll start taking away fats from, usually it's further away from the workout, preserve carbs as long as I can, because that's the fuel for the workout, and so forth. So after 1 or 2 of these adjustments, most of the people are pretty smart. They can see the pattern of how I could do stuff. And they say, okay, you've cut away fats here. You're going to cut away fats again next. At some point, you're going to start cutting away carbs. Well, can't we just cut it all out now? Right? Can I just cut out all the carbs now? Because I've heard the carbs make you fat. Can I take away all the carbs now and speed this up a little bit? And then I go to the whole thing, like I explain like why that's not a good idea, and like you should go by pace, all that stuff I just said. Well, invariably, some people are just going to go at it on their own. They think they've got it figured out sufficiently to just cut to the chase, and I'm not going to wait for this Jenkins guy to tell me when it's okay. I'm just going to do it. Every single time I've seen somebody do that, without fail, what happens is they'll start accelerating their weight loss for like a couple weeks. Like, well, I distinctly remember one guy in particular. He said he needed, and those are his direct words, he needed to lose more than 3 pounds a week. He needed to lose like 5 to 6 pounds a week. And for his initial body weight, about 2 to 3 pounds a week was probably appropriate at the beginning, and it's going to slow down to even lower than that as we go along. He needed to lose 3 to 5 pounds a week. And then he did for a little bit. And it was obvious to me that he was probably just eating, I don't know, chicken and broccoli, and that was it. It was like a total just sadness diet. And it was awesome. I was like, oh, well, okay, well, maybe this is made it work. Then one day I just never heard from him. He just completely ghosted me. And I reached out a couple of times to see like, hey man, I haven't heard from you in a little while. Is everything going okay? You were doing great. Like what happened? Just completely fell off the wagon and never heard from him again. So I don't know if he gained all his weight back, but my read on that was that he just crashed and burned. It's just like, you ever go out in the first round of a five round workout too hot, and then in round 1, round 2, you're ahead of the rest of everyone, and the whole gym is behind you, and you're feeling like you're hot shit, and you're like, okay, I'm crushing this. And then all of a sudden the monkey jumps on your back, and then you, you let go of the bar, or you come off the pull-up bar, whatever it is, and your pace slows down to a crawl. And that's exactly what happens with diet. So pacing, man, that's another topic, like pacing that you learn from the CrossFit experience also applies to a lot of things in life, and nutrition is certainly one of them.
It does, mate.
So I was giving you kind of little snippets of one example. I've seen it dozens of times, over and over and over again. I've seen that with nutrition.
And it's really sad as well, because you plow your time and effort into these individuals, right? And you genuinely want to see them succeed. And they're paying. Exactly.
They're paying a shit ton of money, man. It's like, I couldn't have afforded one-on-one coaching until I became a one-on-one coach. Yeah. You know, like it's expensive stuff. And it's like, you're paying for like expertise, take it or leave it, you know? So it's like, for me, it's like no skin off my back. They don't take it, then that's, you can't force somebody to take it. But
yeah, you can
that's what blows my mind about it. It's like, you're paying all this money and you're not going to listen. Like, okay, suit yourself.
I mean, some people, they get the satisfaction of either saying they're going to do it, paying that they're going to do it. Like the number of people that pay for a gym membership but show up once a week, if that. Mm-hmm. It's like they feel good because money's leaving their wallet.
Yep. The other, as far as the money aspect too, the other thing that I've seen a lot that it can be a downfall for some clients is they want to approach the nutrition coaching as something that they pay for and therefore farm out completely, and don't want to have to think or learn anything because they're paying for it. Yeah. They want to pay someone else to do all the thinking. And that can be a rub, because I, like, as you've probably already gathered, I'm more like, okay, no, I'm not going to be around forever. I get that on some stuff. Like I do that. Like that's like the home repair or car repair. Like I don't do any of that shit because I don't know how to do it. I'm going to pay someone to do it. I'm going to totally farm that, outsource it. I will gladly. We actually just had someone out to my house today we need some to clean our gutters and paint the trim of the house. Could I spend a weekend and figure out how to do that, or and buy all the stuff and do it? Sure, but I don't have the time. I don't want to take the time. I'm going to pay someone to do it. A lot of people want to approach nutrition that way, and that may work for some people, but for me and my style, and I think by and large, it shouldn't really work that way, because it needs to be like, I mean, we all eat. Like that's a fundamental human behavior, and we benefit. Our health. My thesis is that our health and fitness are optimized when you take ownership over your own nutrition, and you really understand the basics. You don't have to understand the biochemistry in a lot of depth, but you need to understand. Okay, these are the elements of a healthy diet for me that supports my fitness, my exercise routine, and keeps me at this body composition where I want to be. Within a range. Like having that level of understanding, that's really difficult to just completely farm out. So that's another kind of big takeaway for a certain type of, I guess, client. Like it tends to be I mean, it's in some ways it's the ideal client. They have the money. They expect a bespoke service, and it's my pleasure to give that to them. But the rub is when they're not interested in the education piece. They just want to kind of keep me on retainer and do all the thinking for them, and that's that's not optimal. So
that's the same inside the gym as well, right? Like you've got to be able to be independent of your own fitness journey. Like you can't be solely dependent on the coach, the nutrition coach, the mentor, or whoever's in front of you, because when they leave, you're screwed. It's like your one lifeline's been taken away from you, and you're back to the beginning. Yeah, it's about having a little bit of accountability and taking things onto your shoulders, which, I mean, you're the one who's putting it in your face, chewing it and swallowing it. So, I mean, you should be doing that anyway, right?
You should just like kind of figure, like understand, like even if which I don't do this, even if I wrote literally every, like not just like the macros, but like what to eat and when, like you think that some people would start to understand, okay, I can probably do this without, paying this guy however much money per month, but some people just they don't want to think. They want to completely farm that out. And I mean, I get it, because if that's not if you don't have the background in it, you're not interested in it. I found a lot of people just don't like to eat. They're bothered by the idea of preparing food and eating it. So I get it, but we got to eat. I mean, you can do the fasting thing. We can come up with all kinds of ways to make it easier, but fundamentally we all have to have nutrition. So it kind of, to me, it makes sense to try to understand it a little bit. So
Yeah, I mean, there is common themes that end up blaring out at you and be like, hey, this is kind of
hmm
probably going to be the way that you need to go forward with it. And yeah, I
hmm
have had people come
hmm
to me and like, Alex, can you just write down exactly what you want me to do so I can just read it and do it? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to
without
do
the
it, pal,
uh-huh.
because I ain't
Nope.
going to be here forever. And I don't want you to ring me up in 20 years and be like, I'm
Correct.
falling off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you do some nutrition coaching as well?
I have done in the past.
Uh-huh.
In the sense of literally just helping people out. Like everyone, I think everyone should, especially as a coach, you need a base knowledge of nutrition. You need to understand the
hmm
macros, figuring all that
Absolutely.
stuff out, different dietary plans,
hmm
and all that. I'm not an
hmm
expert. That's not my expertise.
Okay.
If you would, I don't like to use the term speciality.
hmm
Like I am no
Sure, go
doctor,
ahead.
but if you're gonna give me one, I'd say coaching the youth. So going back to
Oh,
like
great.
half an hour ago, I love coaching the
Yeah.
youth.
Yeah.
Youth S&C coach,
Love it.
kind of my
Oh, it's fantastic.
yeah. So that's what lights my soul on fire. However,
Yeah.
so does everything else. So I kind of like being a
There's
jack of all
a
trades.
Well, there's my opinion, man. I think there's a market for that,
Oh
big
yeah,
time, big time. I mean, I don't know in your probably. I think it's got to be it's got to be worldwide. I mean, certainly here, that is an untapped market for coaching. How to best get parents to. So in my mind, it comes to the conversation of like, uh, in the states, the standard thing that parents and kids do is to have their kids specialize in the sport
hmm
from an early age. I don't know if it's like that in New Zealand. It probably is, but like the kid, if they want to be a soccer player, which is what we call it here, then they're playing soccer from age 3 and on, right?
yeah,
Or if they're going to play lacrosse, it's only lacrosse. It's lazy, and even I grew up like I played golf, and I probably played way too much golf because now I hate golf. Um, I appreciate it, but I don't want to play it anymore because I just did it too much as a kid. So to move away from that specialization model and more towards a general physical preparedness model that can prepare you for any sport. And actually, instead of just play one sport, but play many sports and have like CrossFit type training be the foundation for it all. Man, if that took off and became more mainstream, um, we'd be healthier as a nation, and then beyond just the U.S. But also, man, I mean, parents pay a shit ton of money to put their kids into these programs. And I just think it's an untapped, like from a business perspective, I think it's completely wide open. So
100%. Then you
yeah,
look at
man, that
the human performance section, and you like,
mhm.
man, you could produce some absolutely incredible lads and ladies that would go on and play professional sport. That would just
It'd be
be
crazy.
that would be mental. They would end up
Ki-
being able to do things that you can't even fathom.
The kids, they're even now like the ones that have grown up in CrossFit. I can't remember her name. I think I started following her on Instagram, but there was a 16-year-old CrossFit, uh, uh, a 16-year-old girl who is competing. Her guess her goal is to go to the game. I don't know if she's been to the youth games yet or not, but was it a 275-pound jerk or something? I can't remember. It doesn't even register with me what her lift was, but it was just something more than I can do for sure by a lot,
Yeah,
whatever it was. Um, and I think I saw something like a girl about that age also snatching pretty close to 200 pounds. And it's like, what? It's crazy. It's
it's
nuts.
crazy. Yeah,
So yeah, what the kids are doing now, it's insane.
I'd love to see. So like a very quick background. Like grew up in Manchester
hmm
in the northwest of England. Like not the
hmm
most affluent of areas. I'd like
Sure.
to see it get into the education system. It's then created through subsidy, so kids, it's part of their physical education, go and actually do functional fitness, I'm going to call it, because whether it gets
hmm
into the CrossFit brand and we lead it forwards, or if it doesn't, whichever, it's the same thing. um I'd love to see it get subsidized so every kid gets the opportunity to do it, instead of it just being a pay to play
hmm
society. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
the rich kids get it and everyone else kind of doesn't.
Yeah, my American capitalism background was kind of showing through a minute there, but
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, I think there's room for both. I think like, as far as like, one thing I'm passionate about for people like yourself though, is to make sure that coaches are making a living wage, which
Mhm,
a lot of times they're not.
mhm.
Um, but for sure, absolutely, that it should be more, the methodology should be accessible to, like, if you have a warm body and a pulse, you should be doing something like CrossFit from the jump, as soon as you can, literally as soon as you can, like, crawl.
And your
Um,
research is showing it.
I've not yet, but yeah, it will.
It's,
Yeah,
it's
we're working on that. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. For
it's
sure.
putting down the slabs for everyone else to follow. You're carving out a path that no one else has necessarily done, or veering off the sort of given track. And I think it's going to be awesome to see, mate.
It's fun, man. It's well, in the exercise science space, we're doing stuff that's different for the readership of our papers.
Mm,
That is the mainstream academic type, the field.
mm.
But we're not doing anything that a CrossFitter or like a trainer would look at what we're doing and be like, oh yeah, we do that every day, right? So it's, for me, that's really cool. Like, this nice collision of worlds.
Mm.
Um, where, like, and I've heard people call their gym uh like a laboratory, where
Mm.
you can do like different experiments with people, and try different methodologies to see what works and what doesn't. um and that's kind of that embodies a lot of what we're trying to do, so
Mm.
it's pretty
Well,
cool.
we just see it in the society. You see it in the literature, though.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
we don't know numbers or anything like that. We just think, oh yeah, it's common
Hmm.
sense. It's right in front of your
Right.
eyes there, and
Right.
then you need the obviously the science to back it up.
Right. Right.
Right, brother. I really appreciate your time.
Cool, man.
I know you need to jump off.
Yeah, I just looked at the time. I do have a hard stop here,
That's
but
okay.
I wish I didn't. I wish
It's
I
all
didn't,
good,
because this is a lot of fun, man.
mate.
But
You can always come back on
yeah, well, thank
anytime.
you so much for having me on, man. Yeah, if I can ever, if you need me back on, or if we want to talk about anything that we just touched on and maybe take a deeper dive, I love talking about the nutrition stuff anytime. It's one of my favorite topics, and
Mm.
man, I look forward to. I have to admit, I didn't know about your podcast before I heard Carl on his interview,
All
and
right.
I've enjoyed listening to some of those episodes. And I look forward to following you and your work, man. So I really appreciate the chance to be on here and to get to know you a little bit better. So
Thank you,
good luck
sir.
with everything you're doing.
You too, brother. Take it easy. Thank you very much again.
Okay. All right. You too. Okay. Take care.
See you later, mate.
I'll see you.
Bye.